we'll go ahead and we'll get started. Quick reminder, this is going to be the second workshop in our Career Readiness Series. Today we're going to be talking about applications, more so geared towards internships. However, kind of the same application process can also be used for full-time jobs. So with that being said, we'll start off with a few announcements, so we'll go ahead and get started with that.
Oh, is it too?
Are you good with all the presentation slides? It's going to be the
We need
We need to talk about announcements real quick.
All right. Okay, so first off, we have first off we have a BeReal sponsorship that's happening right now. How many of us already have BeReal?
No.
Okay, good majority of us. How many of us don't have it?
I'm not downloading it.
Okay, if you don't have it, why don't you go ahead and download it right now?
Okay.
You guys can scan the QR code and just add 5 friends on BeReal, have notifications on. You just need to post once, and basically we'll get money from you. So just scan the QR code, put your username there, and then BeReal will give us money.
Is this a pyramid scheme?
Kind of. Yeah. Anything you want to say?
Nah.
Alright.
If you want to do it, go for it. But
Alright.
well, you can delete your account right now, and then you can, do it again. Thank you. If you do this, thank you, because this just gives us free money. So appreciate it.
Funds are snacks.
Yeah. It just needs to be a unique username. That's it.
I'll talk about Mass Challenge.
Okay.
Okay, real quick. We also have Match Challenge going on, and this is BCOE's big push for us getting funding. So us as in the entire CS department, also BCOE as a whole as in clubs. So right now there is a challenge every single week to have the most unique donors, and right now we're kind of slacking on our donations. So if you would like to donate to us, and that would contribute to you guys getting shirts, you guys, us supporting you guys in making projects such as servers and whatnot, and just making way cooler events, maybe even flying people over, I don't know. But if you'd like to donate, every single donation is appreciated, but donations over $25, up to $1,000 are gonna be matched by BCOE. So that means if you donate $25, BCOE will also throw in another $25, and $50 for free just for us. Not for free, $25 in the expense of you, but $25 in expense of BCOE. But yeah, and if you do donate, there's a Discord bot that just tells everybody who's donating, so you can get to see your name in the Discord just for real quick. But also, you're gonna get a unique role on Discord that says you donated during this year's Match Challenge, and we're also gonna put your name on the actual website forever. Unless we like nuke the website, but hopefully this website it's not gonna happen because we put a lot of effort into this one. So your name is gonna be on there forever. And then probably next year Match Challenge, those who donated during 2022, 2023, you can get your name on there multiple times. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys, and it's gonna be there.
Anyone have any questions either about the BeReal sponsorship or BCOE Match Challenge before we move on? Yes.
What if I put other people's username on the sheet? Are you gonna get money?
Oh, for username on BeReal?
If you put other people's usernames.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
Because they are looking for unique usernames, so it does have to be a new username. Apart from that.
Yeah. You just has to be a new account.
Yeah.
And then if you say that new account is associated with us, then yeah, it's good. That works. Yeah. Fraudulent. That's how it'll be around here, you just gotta try to see, But yeah.
We need money,
Yeah. Any more
questions before we move on?
Match Challenge. Thank you guys. Thank you. $25.
Alright. Okay, then we'll go ahead, we'll move on then. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about internships and kind of the application lifecycle, and also a few key parts along that lifecycle. So basically at the end of this workshop, we should be able to answer a few key ideas, and those are going to kind of go along the lines of like what exactly an internship is for those of us who don't know what that is and why we should be applying for it. And also kind of go into a deeper dive as why doing an internship is going to be useful for us and how it can benefit either our skills or perhaps our future job opportunities. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to what type of materials do we need. Are there any essentially like prereqs to apply? Are there certain materials we need to prepare beforehand? If so, what are those materials and how can we prepare them? And then also just talk about the application process. So how exactly is that entire timeline going to look like? When will you apply for an internship? When will you expect to perhaps hear a response? When will you expect to move on further within the process and whatnot? And then we'll also start talking about what exactly an OA is, and kind of going based off of that, what code signals and hacker ranks are and kind of what the relationship to an OA is. And the same goes for kind of like behavioral assessments, going more so with higher view and Pymetrics, and we'll talk more about that as well. Any questions so far? All right, cool, let's go ahead, let's move on then. So we'll start off with a quick introduction as to what exactly internships are. So how many of us have either had an internship or know what internships are? Okay, quite a few of us, cool. So basically, for those of us who don't know what an internship is, it is a great way to get industry experience without actually being in industry, right? So right now, all of us are in we are all college students, right? Most of us, I think all of us here are undergrad students so far? Yeah? Anyone, any grad students in here? One grad, all right, for sure. Okay, but the main thing is that we're able to get industry experience while still learning about computer science and all its different aspects, right? So it's a great opportunity to explore perhaps what you may like about computer science or what you don't like about computer science, right? Because remember that computer science isn't a singular field, right? There are multiple divisions that come with computer science, right? You could go with software engineering, DevOps, cybersecurity, embedded systems, cloud engineering, things like that, right? So it's a great opportunity to be able to explore each field and think about, like, is this something that you later on want to pursue, or perhaps you may want to explore other options, right? And obviously, since it is an internship, right, it's only a commitment for the summer, right? You aren't committing to this said company for multiple years, right? So that's also another great benefit with that. And alongside that, while you guys are writing code within your classes, how many of us actually care about the style of the code that we're writing? Can I get a quick raise of hands?
Gotta comment on everything.
All right, okay, so quite a few of us, right? But most of the times when we're usually writing code, we won't really think about the style of the code that we're writing, or perhaps how we can make our code more efficient, perhaps, right? And this is really where internships kind of come into play, where they can teach you about production level code, right? And what production level code is code that is actually being used within the industry, right? So for example, when you guys open up a website, right, there are certain features that you guys are able to use, right? So for example, when you guys are perhaps inputting data into a form, right? Perhaps there is some form validation that goes with it, right? That is perhaps something that you may not do inside of your personal projects, right? But obviously, there are certain reasons why companies may do that, right? Simply because it may be, like less API calls for them to consider your authentication requirements and whatnot, but that gets a little bit too technical, so we won't go there. But the general idea is that you are able to produce production level code with mentors who are kind of able to help you understand what production level code will look like and how you can make your code style better. Yeah? Any questions so far? All right, cool. And then at the same time, we're also able to explore large scale technologies, right? So right now, most of us have been working with probably either C++ or Python, right? I think those are the primary languages, or maybe a lot of us worked with Java coming out of high school, right? And all of the projects that we worked with so far were usually contained within a few files, right? Yes? Yeah. But with production level code and real companies, right, all of their code won't be stored within 5-6 files, right? It may be hundreds of files that are spread across multiple repositories, right? So then at that point, you kind of have to understand how all of these repositories from different locations come together and are still able to make a functioning product, right? So that's definitely something that you wouldn't be able to replicate in either your personal projects or even in a classroom environment, right? So this is definitely one of the cool things about internships. And another thing is you're also able to kind of understand why certain technologies are used, right? So for example, a lot of monitoring systems, right? So this won't really relate to kind of what you guys are doing right now, but if you guys were to deploy, some sort of service, obviously you guys want to be checking if that service is essentially working or not, right? And if it has failed, perhaps you want to receive a notification about that, right? In order to actually implement that system and kind of understand the benefit of it, it may not be as feasible with a small scale project, right? Because with a small scale project, you can just simply look at the code, right? Or perhaps just look at the system and be like, this is working. This system is not working, let's fix it, right? However, if you have, say, hundreds or even thousands of these applications running all at the same time, it's not feasible to go through each single one and say, this system is working, this one isn't, let's fix this, and then move on, right? So that's why these large-scale technologies will also come into play. And if anyone's wondering kind of what I'm talking about, it's essentially just alert monitoring, and you'll hear a lot of technologies such as Prometheus or any time series databases and Grafana, things like that, which come into alert monitoring, which are able to monitor how your application is doing while it's running in production. And then one of the other, I guess, fun things that kind of is really different from the other fields in colleges is for CS, there is an internship at almost every single level of your college experience, right? Either you are an undergraduate student or a graduate student, there are internships for both. And even as an undergrad student, there are still internships for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, right? And that isn't something that you can really find in other majors, right? And as freshmen, I think we have a lot of freshmen here, right? Raise your hand if you're a freshman here. Yeah, so that's about the entire room here, right? So there are tons of internships that you guys can be applying to as freshmen, right? And these internships, they don't expect you to essentially know anything, right? They expect you that you're gonna be taking maybe 1 or 2 of your first CS classes, right? Intro to programming, where you're gonna be learning about the basics of, in our case, C++, you're learning what variables, loops, functions, classes, pointers, the very fundamentals of it, right? And then during these internships, you'll be exploring more of these technologies, how you can take what you've known, what you've learned within your classrooms and apply them into actual production code. Any questions so far on anything I've been over? No? Okay, cool. And then on top of that, more so from a company side, it is also industry training. So they are able to train you for their company at a much cheaper price. So in their eyes, it's a great benefit. And a lot of times, as an intern, you will also receive return offers, either to return as an intern the next year, or perhaps even get a full-time offer afterwards, right? So it's a great way to secure a job once you have graduated from college, right? And apart from that, you also get to enlarge your networking skills and just your technological skills as well, right? You're gonna meet tons of new people at your internships. You're gonna work very closely with the people on your team. You're gonna have maybe 1 or 2 dedicated mentors who are kind of there to help you with anything and really just everything that you run into, right? And you will also just have other interns who will also come from other colleges, perhaps other countries, who are also working on very similar technologies. And you guys can link together, figure out problems together, just connect, make new friends and whatnot. And as I mentioned before, it's also easier when you guys are going to be applying for full-time opportunities, because a lot of these full-time opportunities are going to check for, have you had any industry level experience where you can kind of justify that you are prepared for this full-time job, right? Right now, a lot of us, if we were to apply for a full-time job, we can't really say we're ready for it, right? Simply because we haven't exactly dipped our toes into industry and kind of understood the level at which code is being produced, right? So internships really help with that process. Yeah, any questions? All right, okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead, let's move on then. Okay, so what are some materials that we will need for when applying to these internships, right? So first off is our resume. So remember last week we went over kind of how to build a resume, what are the different tips and tricks to have an efficient resume that passes through an ATS, as well as what are the different components of our resume, right? And many times you will see that a cover letter is also kind of optional, or perhaps in some situations required for your internship. A cover letter is optional. You can definitely get internships without having a cover letter. However, it's kind of up to you if you want to invest the time into writing one. And many times, especially since most of you guys are freshmen and you guys will be applying for freshman level internships, there is a high chance it will ask you about your transcript. So mostly it's just gonna be asking, you know, like what type of classes are you taking currently, just to kind of gauge what your skill level is gonna look like when you are entering your internship, right? Recently, I've also been seeing a lot of them are asking for our SAT scores. Honestly, I'm not sure why, but some of them are for some reason, and they are asking for breakdowns. So there is that. Again, this is an optional field, so if you think your SAT score is good enough, feel free to put it. Otherwise, I would probably not put it, and that's kind of a red flag on the company, but yeah. And then apart from that, so those are the materials that are required for you to actually apply to the internship, right? However, on the other hand, we also want something to kind of keep track of how we are, or how many applications we have completed and what stages we are at for these applications, right? Have we received an email back, perhaps asking for more information about us, or perhaps were we asked for an interview, coding assessment, things like that, right? So this is kind of where an application tracker comes in. So there's two things that you can kind of implement for this. One is, we kind of mentioned this last week as well, where you can have a professional email where everything inside of that professional email is solely regarding kind of industry experience and your professional career, where you will receive emails from perhaps recruiters or companies asking you like, hey, you know, we think we want to move forward with your application, you know, here's a coding assessment, whatnot. And the reason I say this is a lot of times our personal emails will have a lot of spam, and the emails that we're going to be receiving from these companies will have a deadline, right? For example, they will ask us to complete a certain assessment or perhaps, you know, a certain interview by a certain date, right? So for example, they may give us only like 5 days or 10 days to complete that assessment. So that's why it's very important that we kind of have a separate place where we're able to prioritize and see that, oh, hey, you know, I received an email today at, you know, like in the morning that I have 3 days to complete this interview, right? Otherwise, what's gonna happen is if you see your email like 3 days later and you see like, oh man, I had this email that was sent 3 days ago and it asked me to fill out this interview that was due in 3 days, right? Obviously, you are gonna have a much harder time. So that is definitely one thing to consider when filling out your applications. And then the second thing is a spreadsheet to track your applications. So I will be sharing a kind of like application tracker that will essentially allow you to track how many applications you've applied to and kind of what the status of those applications are. So we'll go into more details as we move on there. Next slide, please. All right, so let's go ahead, let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of the materials that we just talked about. Okay, so first off, I think a lot of us kind of have a question of where we can find our transcripts, right? So how many of us are familiar with RWeb? Okay, cool. Yeah, so we know kind of RWeb is our like Riverside portal, right? This is where we can access information regarding our financial aid, information regarding just our general profile, as well as like registration information as well, right? And we can also find our transcript information as well, where we can see our unofficial transcript and actually print that out and use that for the applications that we need it for. So if you just go to the home page for RWeb, on kind of like where the icons are under self-service, on the bottom right-hand corner, you should see a transcript and I think like verifications icon. And once you click on that, it will take you to a new page. And then from there, if you just click on unofficial transcript, you can just go ahead and print that page out. And that's really all your recruiters or like your companies will need to see in regards to your transcript. Any questions there? Yeah, go ahead. So when you print it out, right, there should be an option to just save it as a PDF. This way you don't have to like physically print it out. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead, let's move on. Okay, so this kind of just expands a little bit more onto the needs or kind of why we would want a professional email, right? So you get to separate your personal and your professional email. So if you guys have certain things that you guys want to separate in terms of your professional and like personal careers, that's completely fine. This is a great way to do that. In addition, usually your professional emails will also have less spam, just because companies won't sell your data as often. And it's also kind of like a higher priority email, right? A lot of times with our personal emails, we may have like thousands of notifications or unread emails that we may have not seen. So it's kind of hard to notice when a new email has come in, right? However, with a professional email, it's much, much easier to keep track of because the numbers are going to be much, much lower, right? The only emails that we really are going to be getting are going to be like confirmation emails or emails asking for more information or perhaps moving our application forward in the process, right? And then this is also a great chance to rename your email addresses. So I know like when a lot of us are young, you guys may have had very unique names for your emails. So for example, like ilovedogs@gmail.com, that perhaps may not be what you want for your professional email, right? Perhaps you want something maybe like your first name, maybe underscore like your last name @gmail.com, right? Something that isn't like I love dogs, like I love cats@gmail.com, right? Any questions there? Yeah.
So like we are already using our personal email to do a lot of things, like maybe already have a get book page or already apply for something. Is it possible to move everything to a professional email or is it necessary?
You can move it. I don't think you need to. Your GitHub, it's okay if you have it on your personal. This kind of goes for everyone. For your GitHubs, I would recommend just having one account, because otherwise if you have two accounts, you're gonna have to link both of them onto your resumes, and it's gonna kind of be confusing for the recruiter when they're going through your GitHub and they see like two GitHub accounts, right? So I would just recommend having one where you use it for both school and personal projects, right? Because CS100 is kind of where you guys are gonna be starting to use GitHub. So if you guys haven't already, make sure you guys like create a GitHub, store projects that you guys will be creating or perhaps have already created on GitHub as well. Because this is, remember that GitHub is kind of your professional portfolio, right? It's kind of the LinkedIn for computer science majors, right? Yeah, and then in terms of like emails, so if you have already applied using your personal email, that's completely fine. You can continue to apply using your personal email if you think that you can keep track of everything there. Otherwise, if you think like it's too messy, then just feel free to create a new one. And it's okay if you have some applications on your personal and everything else on your professional, right? This is also kind of where the application tracker comes in, right? You'll know exactly which companies you've applied to and which roles you've applied to. So if you notice that, hey, I haven't received any updates from, perhaps like Facebook, right? Then you can check both of your emails to see like which email had that confirmation email and perhaps maybe some updates regarding that application. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead, let's move on then. Okay, so then we come on to the application tracker, right? This is basically a mandatory thing all of you guys should be having when you guys are working on your applications, right? Because as CS majors, you guys aren't going to be applying to one or two roles, right? You guys are going to be applying to tens to like hundreds of roles, right? So it's very important that you guys are able to keep track of which companies you've applied to so that you guys don't reapply to the same role again and again and kind of create that frustration, right? And it's also a great way to kind of just update the status of your application, right? You'll be able to see like you have applied to this position, perhaps you have not heard back, or maybe you have and you have perhaps an online assessment or a behavioral interview due in the next few days, or perhaps you were just flat out rejected from this role, right? So it kind of just helps you keep track of which companies have taken your application further and which have rejected you on the spot. So you kind of know mentally like, oh, all the companies have rejected me, I should probably apply to more or something like that, right? And then this last bullet point here is actually a link. So you guys will have access to the slides and you guys can visit it here as well. But I will also be dropping the link in the Discord and you guys can all, it is a template, so you guys will just have to create your own copy and then go from there. Yeah, and then we'll do a walkthrough of the template so you guys kind of understand how to use it. Obviously, this isn't like a required template. You guys can choose to create your own. However, the template I'll be providing is the one that I use personally, and I thought it was very useful in terms of like kind of keeping track of everything that you need. Yeah? Any questions? All right, let's go ahead, let's move on then. How many of us have heard of an OA?
Online assessment.
Yes. Can I get a quick raise of hands for OAs? Okay, how many of us have taken an OA? How many of us have been clapped by an OA? Oh, for sure. So for us that don't know, OA stands for online assessment, and usually this will be regarding a coding assessment, right? Where you will be asked some, perhaps one or multiple coding questions, and you'll be required to answer them in a given language. Usually you're allowed to choose which language, and go from there, right? It's very similar to a resume screening. Sometimes these OAs will be given immediately when you apply. Sometimes it will be given after they have screened your resume, right? So perhaps you may receive it after a week of applying, right? So for example, like TikTok, they give you the OA a week after you have applied, right? Whereas some companies, they will give it to you immediately, right? So definitely check your emails after each application to make sure that you guys haven't immediately received an OA. And usually these OAs will be very broad, right? They are essentially allowed to ask you any questions. However, do keep in mind that the role that you're going to be applying to, those questions will usually be tailored towards that role, right? So for example, if you're applying to a suite role, you will probably get questions regarding like general data structures and algorithms, right? And another thing to keep in mind is the application level, right? So for example, as freshmen, you guys won't be getting like data structures and algorithms questions. You guys may be getting much simpler questions such as like sorting an array, or perhaps like figuring out if a given string is like a palindrome or something like that, right? So they will consider essentially like what grade and kind of what your experience with coding is. So at the same time, this also means, if you are an upperclassman, so like either a junior or senior, don't expect to be getting like a sorting algorithm question, right? You may be getting a much harder like graph question, or perhaps like a tree question, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And that's also something useful to keep in mind when you guys are preparing, right? Kind of prepare at the level that you've been learning throughout your classes. And then in terms of the actual deadlines, so these OAs will have a deadline, and there's kind of two ways these deadlines go. So one is when the actual test is due, right? So for example, when the actual OA is given, usually you will have a few options for when they will be due. Either it might be like 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, or 14 days. Usually it will be 10 to 14 days, or 7 to 14 days, my bad, yeah. And that is just for you to select any time within that week or 2 weeks to take that OA, right? And on top of that, do you want to come in? All right. Okay, and a lot of these OAs, they may or may not be timed, right? So what that means is when you start the actual OA, you may or may not be on a timer. And these timers, again, might range on like 30, 60, or 120 minutes, right? So about half an hour to 2 hours, right? And based off of the time, you can also kind of gauge as to how many questions they might be asking, right? For example, for 30 minutes, they perhaps may only ask you one coding question, right? Or worst case, they may ask you one coding question and one multiple choice question, right? And obviously with 60 minutes or 120 minutes, you can expect multiple questions, right? For example, for TikTok, they had 120 minutes, and they were 3 coding questions and 2 multiple choice questions, right? So that's just to kind of give you a gauge as to how much time you will have, and that's also something that you have to keep in mind when working on these OAs. Is how much time you have, so that, because obviously you want to try your best to attempt as many questions as possible, and it's okay if you don't pass all the test cases, right? It's okay to have, say maybe like 12 out of 15 test cases done, and then move on to the next question where perhaps you can achieve even more test cases, right? Otherwise, if you spend too much time trying to perfect one problem, you may not have enough time, and instead of passing like say 30 test cases total, you only pass 15, because you were too focused on trying to perfect that one question. Yeah? Okay. And then the other thing is some of these OAs may have no time, right? So they just may be open for the entirety of that time window that you are allotted, right? So sometimes you may have an entire like 5 days to work on these OAs, right? And in those situations, it's always advised that you open it up immediately, look at the questions, and it's okay if you don't want to do them right then and there, but at least you have the questions in your head, so you can kind of think about them as your days go on, and you can think about various ways to approach the problem, and eventually even like try out a few of these solutions, see if they work, see if they pass the test cases, and if you don't, well, that's okay. You always have more time to come up with a new solution, right? But the main thing is always start early, especially if you have multiple days to work on these OAs. Yeah? Any questions there? Okay, and then this last bullet point here, the HackerRank and the Code Signal, those are simply just platforms for these OAs, right? Those are the companies that are going to be providing you with the questions and providing you with the like online editor that you will be able to write your code, run your code, test it out, see if it passes all the test cases and whatnot. Yeah? Any questions there? All right, cool. Let's go ahead. Let's move on then. Okay, so then we come on to behavioral interviews. How many of us have taken a behavioral interview? Okay, not a lot of us. Okay, so a behavioral interview is essentially a way for a recruiter to gain more insight about you outside of your technical abilities, right? So the OA is more so to gauge how technically proficient are you, right? If I were to give you a technical task, would you be able to complete it, right? That's kind of what the OA is testing out. Whereas with a behavioral interview, it's more so how do you work in a team environment, right? If perhaps you were faced with a challenge, what are some ways that you would overcome that challenge, right? Would you perhaps reach out to other members within your team? Or would you try to solve it alone? Or would you just try to ignore the problem as a whole, right? So those are the kind of things that the behavioral interviews are going to test out, right? It also tests out some other qualities as well. So for example, like what are some leadership examples that you may have done in the past, right? For example, let's say a project wasn't going too well and you had to step up and become a leader. How did you go about that? What were some maybe changes that you made in the process and whatnot? As well as your adaptability, right? So for example, let's say, I don't know, your manager changed or perhaps someone like 180, my bad. Someone 180 the project, right? So how were you able to cope with those changes? Were you able to ensure that the project met production, or did you give up, or what happened in those situations, right? And that kind of goes hand in hand with changes to environment, right? And a lot of times these questions may also be disguised as games. So how many of us have heard of Pymetric or done a Pymetrics like assessment? Okay, so three of us?
What was the question?
How many of us have done a Pymetrics assessment?
What is that?
Oh, for sure.
It's like a video.
Oh, like an IQ test.
Yeah. Huh?
I think I've done one as well.
Okay, so 4 of us. Epic. Basically, a lot of times, obviously you can kind of imagine with these behavioral interviews, it's very easy to kind of fake a response, right? You can say one thing, but perhaps actually did another thing, right? And kind of with, I guess like everyone's public speaking skills, it's very hard to be able to determine if they actually went through with what they said, right? So a lot of times what companies will do is they'll give you games where they're subconsciously trying to test out your abilities or like your personality and your qualities, right? So perhaps you may be given a certain set of games where you're asked to recognize certain patterns, or perhaps just do very simple tasks, and based off of those tasks, you may have perhaps found a more efficient way to do that task and kind of measures your learning as you go on, so that if you were placed into an actual environment where you were met with something completely new, you kind of know your way around it and you're able to figure it out and be able to actually produce a result. Yeah? Any questions there? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead. Let's move on then. Okay, so just some general tips for the application process. So key thing is application season has been open already. It's been open since August. Yes, I think August. And it is also coming to a close very soon. It's going to close around November, December. There is going to be a second wave that is going to open up during the spring. However, personally, I would not trust the spring wave simply because a lot of that spring wave is cleaning up the fall wave, which is going on right now, right? Because keep in mind, if you get multiple offers, you'll have to reject one, and that spring wave is kind of just filling up all of those positions. With that being said, remember that within each company that you will be applying, there are multiple roles that you can apply for, right? You're not exactly limited to, you must only apply to one role, right? However, some companies do have restrictions as to basically like to enhance your ability or like enhance your chances, only apply to X amount of roles. So for example, like TikTok only has 2 roles, Google only has 3 roles within like a 6-month period, right? So that is also something to keep in mind, is if you are met with these restrictions, take a look at all of the roles, look at the ones that seem most interesting to you, right? Think about like, is this something that I want to be doing for the entire summer next year, right? Or perhaps, is there another role that I would be better suited for, right? So that's also something that you guys want to be thinking about when applying to these roles, right? Don't blindly apply to all of the roles that are there. Think about what you wanted to be doing with your career and perhaps what fields you guys want to be exploring. And then finally, take a deep breath. It is not the end of the world if you do not get one. Remember that it is possible to still move on with your career without an internship. Just an internship is usually a great way to kind of dip your feet into industry. However, it is not a requirement in order for you to get a full-time job. Yeah? Any questions there? No? Okay, cool. I think the next slide is just questions here. So what we'll go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at the application tracker template. You'll have your first column with the company name, right? So for example, say like, I don't know, we're applying Google, right? And then the application link. So what is the direct link to actually apply for that job? Maybe some notes about it. So the notes section is more so for you guys to like rant about the company. Perhaps there were certain things you guys didn't like about the company. Maybe you guys didn't like the application portal. This is definitely a spot to do it. I do this all the time, where I'll just rant about like, oh, the application portal was terrible. Like the UI wasn't working, or like something like that, or like they required too much information about me, or like my resume wasn't working, or something like that, right? At the same time, this is also a great place to put in just any general notes, right? So for example, if there are certain requirements, so for example, like you have received an OA immediately, this might be a great place to put that and just say like OA due in 7 days, and maybe put some details like it's a 2-hour OA, and maybe like need to start preparing for it and whatnot, right? Any questions on those 3 sections so far? Okay, and then I have 3 friend sections here. So one thing with applications is it's really important to kind of be applying with friends, right? Reason being is you guys are going to be applying to tons of companies, right? And I always recommend split up the work with a friend, right? So maybe if you are working in, I don't know, like in this case, a team of 3, right? Instead of getting, say, 100 links by yourself, perhaps you only need to get like 1/3 of those links, right? You only need to get like 33 of those links, and then you can still apply to 100 jobs, right? And the other 2 people would also get like 33 links, and at the end, you'd have a list of like 100 or so applications that you can apply for, right? So it minimizes the amount of work that you would have to do, right? Obviously, you don't want to make it too big, because then it does get a little bit confusing, and also you are opening up about like your application process to other individuals. So usually I would only recommend doing it within a friend group, or like someone you trust, I guess, right? But it's a great way to split up the work, and then you have your, I guess, like statuses for each section, right? So essentially you can track how many internships have you applied for, how many online assessments have you do you need to do? do you have any interviews you need to do? Have you been rejected from anywhere? And finally, have you been accepted anywhere, right? And if you just click on these drop downs, you'll have those statuses. So for example, if you like apply here, you'll notice it highlights and also updates this section here, right? So this will just kind of give you a numerical analytic as to where you stand in terms of how many applications you have done. Because one thing to remember is that internships is solely a number game, right? The more you apply to, the more likely you are to get accepted or perhaps even just receive feedback or an interview from a company, right? So that is something to kind of keep in mind when applying is don't apply within the 20s or 30s, aim for the hundreds so that you're able to maximize your chances for how many internships you guys are able to get, right? And it's okay if you get multiple internships, right? If you get multiple offers, this is like one of those like flex moments where you tell companies like, no, I'm gonna reject you instead, right? So that is where you guys want to be at, is where you guys are rejecting the companies instead of them rejecting you. But apart from that, there's also just a quick example. So for example here, this is kind of what it would look like filled out, right? Where you have the company name, right? So for example, in this case, Google, and then we have the application link. And then if you just click on this link, this will take you directly to the application, and you can just click apply, put in your data, and you'll be good to go. And then obviously you can put notes. So sometimes if you are applying for multiple roles, a good note might be talking about what role it is, right? Sometimes just because you and your friends may not have the same exact interest, right? So maybe your friend is interested in embedded, whereas you're interested in suite. So perhaps you don't want to be applying to the embedded internships, and your friend doesn't want to apply to the suite internships, right? So you can keep that in here, and then obviously you can update your status. So for example, like, I don't know, let's say friend 1 got applied, friend 2 had an interview, and friend 3 got accepted, right? So it has cool colors, it looks nice, it's also useful, so just something to keep in mind. Any questions on that, on how to use this? Okay, cool. So with that being said then, we ended a little bit earlier than I hoped, but that is okay. So we'll be spending the next hour or so to just simply apply, like just mass apply to a ton of these internships. So I'll drop the link in a bit, but create a copy, create an application tracker. Obviously, if you guys don't want to use this, that's completely fine. Feel free to use your own. And then go ahead, just start building out, at least build out just what companies you want to apply to and what are the application links for those companies, right? And then you can apply at a later time. Also, I'll be doing resume reviews. So if you guys have your resumes ready, just come up to me, I'll look over it and then give you some feedback as to perhaps how you could improve it, make it better, what are some tips and tricks to kind of get around maybe some of the issues that you have with your resume, things like that. Any questions?
I didn't get a chance to ask this question earlier, but if we're really close to graduation, would you still recommend that we apply it for this fall?
Graduating, so applying for like internships?
Yeah.
So graduating with undergrad, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do you plan to do masters?
Maybe.
Okay. Reason I'm asking is because a lot of those internships are masters, like there are masters internships that you can apply for instead, right? Basically, they will kind of assume that you're out of undergrad by the time that you start your internship and that you're going to be starting your masters, and they may require like a year or two of masters after, right? So that's kind of like a higher level internship that you can also look into. And this isn't only like for some companies. I'm pretty sure like tons and tons of companies have master's internships that you can look into. And once again, whatever field you're interested in, so maybe like SWE, embedded, cybersecurity, whatever it may be, they will also have those internships kind of towards those. And a lot of them will also have research positions too. So like research internships that you can look into.
Will they be like open the same time frame?
Yeah, the time frame is mostly going to be the same. Any other questions? Any other questions? Yeah.
So how do you get this like application?
Oh, I'm gonna drop a link in the Discord general channel for ACM. I'll do that right now.
Andre has a question.
How would I go about getting a referral at a company if I don't know anyone?
Start DMing people on LinkedIn.
Oh, okay, referrals. Slightly, okay, so a few things about referral. Wait, first off, everyone know what a referral is? Andre, what is a referral?
A referral is when someone that works at the company that you're. Why are you pointing the camera at?
Why not?
When someone is working at the company you're applying to, so internally they put in a word for you, and it kind of like makes your application look better. Yeah.
Okay, does everyone now know what a referral is? Yes? Okay, so you're basically just referring a candidate internally within the company, right? So for example, if you work at Google, you'll tell them like, hey, I work at Google. This person kind of also seems like they'd be a great fit for Google, right? So you kind of be like, hey, like, I think they'd be a great fit. Why don't you as a recruiter check them out, see if there's any, if they are like actually fit for the company, and if they are, that's great. The person referring to you will get a bonus of like whatever amount, so it's also beneficial for them. In terms of actually getting these referrals, a lot of these referrals will either come from, a lot of these referrals you guys can get from perhaps either your parents or perhaps like friends and families that you guys already know, right? So a lot of them who might be working in companies that you are also interested in, feel free to talk to them about, perhaps what type of work they do. Obviously engage with them. Don't pull up and be like, referral now, please, goodbye, right? Build a little conversation, be like, hey, so I heard you're working at, I don't know, like Facebook, right? So, maybe what's something interesting about Facebook? What are some things you like? Maybe what are some things you don't like, right? And then be like, oh, I was thinking about interning there for the summer. I was wondering if, you could put in a referral for me or something like that, right? And again, this goes for each company. Each company has a referral process. And usually the person you're asking, they will know about how this process goes, or they can ask around about the referral process, right? And otherwise, outside of kind of like friends and families, you guys can also reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn. A lot of times, if you just search up like a company, for example, like Amazon, and you search up like Amazon recruiters, right? You'll see a list of different recruiters in different fields. So you'll have to look out for the ones kind of regarding your roles and ask them like, hey, I was interested in this role, maybe ask about some opportunities, things like that. And usually they might you can ask them for a referral directly and just be like, I was wondering about this opportunity here that, for say like the software development position at Amazon, and I really wanted to work here. I think I'd be a great fit because of these various skills that I have, and things like that, right? And then hopefully they give you a referral. If you are doing a referral, one thing to keep in mind is make sure you don't apply to the company before getting that referral. Because what happens is when you receive a referral, your contact will put in the referral, and that company will send you a personalized email. That email will have like a special link that you apply from, and it kind of speed runs you through the process. Obviously, it is not guaranteed. Some companies do not even look at referrals. One of them, most notably, being Microsoft. They won't even consider your referrals if you have any, right? So that is also something to kind of consider. But it is something to keep in mind. And usually the best people to ask for referrals are people you have worked very closely with, right? So if you know any alumni, there's a great chance that you can ask them like, hey, remember the time we worked on this project and, blah, 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 blah. Because when they're putting the referrals in, right, they'll also have to talk about kind of your skills and expertise, right? And this is either where your referral can really shine or maybe not shine, right? So obviously you want to be receiving referrals where they put in a good word for you and they talk about maybe past experiences you have had with that employee and things like that, right? So that's another thing to consider with referrals. Any questions? Does that answer your question, Andre?
Yes, it answers my question. Thank you.
Beautiful. Any other questions?
I have something to add on to your referral.
Go for it.
When you ask someone for a referral, make sure you put the job posting, put your resume, and put your graduation year, and put in why you should work at your company. because these are all questions that they're gonna have to fill out themselves, and they have to do less work, then they'll be more willing to recruit you.
Also, give them your email and your phone number. That is also information they have to fill out. Email, phone number, resume, why you think you're a great fit for the company. What else? That's it, and your name.
Yeah, I also have something to add on. So for a lot of large companies, there's like an option for employees to select, like, I personally know this person and I've like worked with them and I can vouch for them, or or like this random person kind of hit me up on LinkedIn kind of a deal. So it helps you give like an excuse as an employee to like say that you referred someone, but if you choose like the latter option of I don't know this person, you like the referee gets an email that's like you've been referred, but it's probably not going to have any impact. So just going off of what Divyank said, you kind of have to like build a relationship, or it's better if you personally know the person, or else it's not going to do much.
Personally know the person or have worked with them, right? So this is why we talk to alumni, right? Because a lot of the alumni, if you work with them, either perhaps within, maybe some projects, or perhaps you've kind of worked under them, maybe in their like research or whatnot, and they're working like full-time in companies that you guys want to be working in, right? It's a great way because now you, that person that you're asking, that employee, they firsthand know how you work, right? They know about your work ethic, they know about the quality of the work that you put out there. So they're able to give a much better referral as to someone you just picked up on LinkedIn. Yeah? Any other questions?